Hi, this is Grace, and this is just a quick heads up that this episode does come with a content warning. Because of the themes in this show, we will have to talk a bit about sexual abuse of minors and also incest. If these things are too triggering for you, you might want to skip this episode. But if you do decide to stick around, I hope you like this one. Okay. Welcome, anime fans and the anime curious, to Where There's a Weeb, There's a Way, a podcast series in which a seasoned otaku and a newbie attempt to put together an anime canon. We're going to be taking a look at some of the most influential shows and films, along with some more modern curiosities to help break a newcomer into the medium. We're your hosts, Grace and Chris. Hi, welcome back, and today we are going to talk about our first shoujo, which is Revolutionary Girl Utena.
Woo!
Yeah.
Revolutionary Girl Utena and its sequel film, The Adolescence of Utena. So you're getting a 2-for-1 package today.
Yeah, so I actually was the one who suggested we should watch Revolutionary Girl Utena as part of our anime binging. I'd heard quite a bit about it and about how weird and interesting and the kind of things that it explored, all under the guise of being like a brightly coloured shoujo anime. So I suggested this one.
And yes, so this for me kind of comes out of a desire to kind of keep the podcast, to keep a podcast diverse, basically. You know, I'm very, very self-conscious about how we're trying to talk about anime, which are kind of good for people to watch, to kind of understand what the medium's all about. I'm very, very understanding that my bias comes as a kind of white male, and like my preference, and I grew up on shonen stuff. That's my bread and butter when it comes to a lot of anime, and obviously I'm extremely aware that it's not all that anime is, of course, about. It is so much more than just shonen. There's a lot of different genres and lots of different aspects to explore when it comes to anime. So I was very much down for diversifying and watching something a little bit different. You know, we were watching My Hero Academia seasons 3 and 4 at roughly the same time I was watching Demon Slayer, and I remember getting to the end of both series and thinking I really enjoyed them, but I want to break from dudes like beating the crap out of each other.
So we'll have some women beating the crap out of each other, and out of dudes too, which is always fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I was very excited to watch Revolutionary Girl Utena. You know, an older one as well, definitely the oldest series we've kind of talked about so far, and I was instantly interested when I heard people kind of comparing Utena to Neon Genesis Evangelion, which is one of my all-time favourite TV shows. And when people kind of compared it, you know, it does to the magic girl genre what Evangelion did to the mecha genre. I was pretty excited. I was like, okay, this has got the potential to be a really, really kind of special and interesting show.
And I think that a lot of younger contemporary showrunners actually hold up this show as being hugely influential.
Yeah, and not specifically like Japanese, like a lot of like Western creators. So like Rebecca Sugar, probably the most famous Utena fan, was heavily inspired by this for their seminal modern classic Steven Universe. It's pretty easy to see where a lot of the kind of Utena influence kind of affects Steven Universe, you know, like the rose quartz and like, you know, pulling a sword out of somebody and like certain action shots and certain poses. But I think also, like, I read an interview with Rebecca Sugar where they kind of talked about their reaction to watching Utena as a queer teenager, and what a huge impact that it had upon her. Which is, yeah, it's pretty nice to hear. And you hear that from a lot of content creators, so you hear that from a lot of creatives who work in Western animation. The influence of Utena is long-reaching and still ongoing, it seems. So it's a huge show. It's 39 episodes with a movie on the end as well. There's a hell of a lot to talk about with this show.
Oh, yeah.
Real short, I will say this, so we'll go out of the way right now. I would make the point that out of all the shows we have watched so far, I would say Revolutionary Girl Utena is technically one of the best shows we've seen. It's so rich and so dense, and there's so much to talk about and think about. The visual metaphors are beautiful, the characters are great, the kind of themes it explores go to really surprising depths, and it truly does live up to kind of this reputation of being, as I say, kind of almost like the Evangelion for the Magic Girl genre, where it starts off fairly standard before morphing into something like much more interesting, which blossoms like a rose when it comes to the movie.
I see what you did there.
Yes. So so lots to talk about Revolutionary Girl Utena. There's so many different aspects that we can't even begin to cover. So let's just try and get on with covering it. So in the Japanese, the series is known as Shōjo Magical Girl Utena, which I don't know what the literal translation is, but it sounds good. So the series was created by kind of like an art collective founded by Kunihiko Ikuhara. Yeah, kind of part of like this kind of like art collective called B Papas, who had involvement in the Utena manga, which started serializing in 1996, appearing in Shogakukan, before debuting as an anime in 1997. Running for, as I mentioned earlier, 39 episodes. Now, obviously, you know, it's easy to look at Wikipedia and assume that the anime is based on the manga, but the answer is actually like a little bit more complicated than that. Seemingly, the manga and the anime were kind of being worked upon at the same time. While the manga had an author in Chiho Saito, the original story was created by B Papas, and then the anime followed fairly soon after, before finishing after 39 episodes and returning to movie theatres across the great Japanese nation in 1999 with the Adolescence of Utena. We're not talking about the manga, neither is it read the manga. I don't know anything about the manga. I know it's quite different.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know it diverges quite a bit. Yeah,
and, well, this will be probably our first of many shout-outs to who we consider to be, I would certainly consider to be an underrated Annie-tuber, and a female Annie-tuber about No Realities, who's someone we kind of both discovered as kind of limp-wristed liberal types who enjoy anime but also social justice. We both stumbled across her YouTube channel, which is really great. She does lots of really interesting videos about representation of kind of like gender, sexuality, and yeah, she had a lot of controversy amongst some people in the anime fan base about her take on this bizarre Dragon Maid series. I don't know. I don't want to know. But more importantly, she also made this great hour-long dissection of Utena, which I think is really good. And
I agree.
It forms a lot of kind of the basis, I guess, of kind of similar to kind of the way I was interpreting Utena. She kind of comes to similar conclusions, but far more eloquently than like I could ever be about the show. So you know, she's really great, and kind of like a lot of kind of the background knowledge of Utena I kind of picked up from her videos. So if I kind of get stuff wrong, because I've only done a limited amount of research, and do apologise, but obviously one of the things that I did learn was about how the manga. The anime wasn't like directly based on the manga. It was like a little bit more kind of complicated than that. So anyway, long story is B Papas are kind of this art collective who went in to create Utena. So it's 1997. You're settling down. You might have played a bit of Sega Saturn. You're having your can of whatever drink you were drinking in mid-90s Japan. You might have finished playing a bit of, I don't know, Final Fantasy VII. And you settle down to watch the telly. You've had your usual run of Dragon Ball, and then here comes Utena with its kind of beautiful faded shoujo backgrounds. Like, you know, I love the backgrounds of shoujo anime, like another the watercolor effects. And Utena kind of starts out as kind of almost what you'd expect from shoujo. There's kind of gentle colour palette to the whole thing. The main girl's got pink hair.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of extremely effeminate males who have no qualms about getting the chests out and, you know...
all sporting long, lustrous hair.
Long flowing hair.
In a multitude of different colours.
Yes, they are certainly fabulous for males of Utena until you find out fairly quickly that they're not so fabulous.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's kind of like... You kind of come into Utena with kind of like slight expectation. I certainly did. And the show cleverly lulls you into a false sense of security about what your expectations for the genre is of Magic Girl, and it kind of slowly begins to kind of draw you into the world before kind of like completely crashing your preconceptions. But I'm probably getting a little bit ahead of myself. Do you want to describe a little bit about what was set up of Revolutionary Girl Utena is, or at least have a go?
Yeah, I will try. Can't make any promises. So Utena is a story about a girl called Utena.
Oh my god.
Who attends a Torii Academy, which is seemingly a normal, and I'm saying like normal in inverted commas here.
Yeah, like the school looks like it's stepped out of like the pastel sketchbook of like a Venetian artist or something, like some, like a great Renaissance artist or something like that.
Yeah. Anyway, she attends this school and she one day gets drawn into what I can only describe as a secret dueling cult. Basically, everyone in this cult is dueling for the hand of a girl called Amphi, who is the Rose Bride and can grant the winning duelist the power to revolutionize the world, whatever that means, somehow. And so everyone, of course, wants to... Amphi is kind of a living MacGuffin. Everyone wants to possess her to get the power to revolutionise the world. And Utena kind of becomes involved in these duels out of a sense of wanting to protect Amphi from some of these quite unsavoury people who are trying to own her.
Very astute and a good attempt at summarising the premise of this very strange show.
And like, it is an attempt because...
I don't think I could have done it better. It's so weird when you say it out loud.
Yeah.
So one of the things is that Utena kind of gets pulled into this, as you described, like almost like a cult thing of where all these different duelists are fighting over the possession of the Rose Bride. Utena, on like a moral level, objects to the idea of someone being possessed by somebody else in that way, and she takes it upon herself to kind of protect Amphi, but then unwittingly, by winning in the first duel, she becomes engaged to the Rose Bride and hijinks ensue because now Amphi is essentially Utena's bride, which leads to all sorts of interesting things for like their relationship and what it means to them, like sexually, romantically, etc. The first kind of 12 episodes follow a very, very similar path of you follow Utena and Amphi. They're up to some sort of hijinks when a member of the student council challenges Utena for the duel to get the hand of the Rose Bride. A lot of them have kind of varying but similar reasons for wanting to fight Utena. You've got Saionji, who is the green-haired one, I believe, and he's green with envy. Again, the character designs are very simple but very, very clever in conveying character emotion. So Saionji's kind of got like long flowing green hair, who's a typical frat boy basically, and just wants Amphi kind of seemingly purely out of a need just to possess her and to have her. And you got Toga, who's kind of designed similarly, but he's got like long flowing red hair. He's kind of like the head don of the student council, but he's kind of very fiery, very kind of passionate. All the girls love him, and he's kind of got his own kind of interesting reasons for wanting to possess Amphi. And you've got Mickey, who's kind of like a short-haired, blue-haired boy, who's a little bit more effeminate than the others, but he wants to possess Amphi more out of like a genuine love and devotion to her. But then you got Juri, who's the other member of the school council, and I kind of forget her exact reasons for... Do you remember her exact reasons?
No.
No, but I think because she's like one of the best duelists in the school, it's more of like a status symbol kind of thing. But we'll get into them in a bit more depth.
Because all these characters they've all got some interesting stuff.
Bit of interesting
going on.
quirks, yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, as I said, the first 12 episodes kind of follow this kind of very similar, very, very structured premise. It made me very aware that we were watching a TV show from a completely different era, where we've kind of gotten used to more modern storytelling techniques for TV shows and TV anime, where it's serialized, each episode leads into the next, and I had almost forgotten what 90s anime was like. Going back and watching Utena, lots of repeated animation, a similar structure to each episode. You know, I said, Utena and Amphi will be doing something, they get challenged to a duel, you find out the reasons why they're being challenged to a duel, and then Utena and the combatant have the duel, and the episode ends. And that's kind of how you have your first 12 episodes. I mean, it's kind of around the second major arc, which is where things start to get a little bit more interesting, because it kind of starts to veer off a little bit from the established formula before eventually getting to the third arc, where it kind of really does start to kind of earn its, in my opinion, its legendary status. So it's one you got to stick with, I think.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of repeated animation. Fortunately, the repeated animation is awesome. One of the most important things of a Magic Girl show is the transformation sequence. And the transformation sequence of Utena going to the duels, where she kind of... This is another important thing we'll talk about Utena as a character in a little bit more depth. Her transformation into her dueling guise is always fun to watch.
Yeah.
It never gets dull, which is
And you
good.
are going to be watching it a lot.
You're watching it a lot.
Yeah.
There's one shot of the school at sunset, which you see a lot as well. It's like a shot of one of the hallways, and you see the red sky. You're going to see that shot a lot. You're going to see a lot of shots a lot. Fortunately, the art design of Revolutionary Girl Utena is strong enough where you will not get bored of those images. I certainly wasn't. So, yeah. But anyway, I'm getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, because like I said, there's a lot to talk about. So
with that in mind, I guess we should talk about some of the characters.
Yes.
In Utena, in Revolutionary Girl Utena. And I guess we should start with the woman herself, Utena Tenjo.
Utena Tenjo, yeah. Utena Tango.
So, Utena is a pink-haired young girl who has decided she wants to be a prince.
Yes. So, so the only time now, I praise the show for never getting bored of repeated animations, but it did become a bit of a joke where, I'd say at least maybe 8 of the episodes, it repeats Utena's origin.
Yeah, and it is the same kind of little bit
it's done as like a fairy tale style, a vignette kind of thing.
Yeah, and it is nice, but you do see it a lot, and we actually theorised this was probably just to use up time.
Yeah.
In the episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there didn't seem to be any pattern as to when they did it. Yeah,
because unlike the transformation sequence, which I would argue does have an important thematic purpose and narrative purpose in the story for reasons that we'll talk about probably in the spoiler section.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the repeating of the fairy tale style opening to Utena's background got a little bit repetitive. But that aside, so Utena basically is you learn that Utena is basically an orphan. But when she was a young girl, she had an encounter with a prince who basically kind of looked after her and cheered her up, kind of thing, gifted her with a ring, like a rose ring, which becomes important later on. And instead of completely falling head over heels for the prince, which she definitely does, she definitely loves the prince. Instead of becoming the prince's princess, she instead thinks, "Oh man, being a prince is great. I want to be a prince." When that's the basis of the character of Utena. And she kind of projects that upon her protecting of Amphi.
Yeah.
Which, again, is an interesting element, and one that we'll definitely talk about a bit more in the spoiler bit. But, yeah, she kind of she's very loyal. People around the school call her a tomboy, because she goes around wearing the boys'
jacket, at least.
Yeah, the boys' uniform.
Yeah.
Everyone loves her in the school. Everyone thinks she's awesome.
Yeah. And she's kind of a jock, I guess.
She is a bit, yeah.
I would say she's kind of like a female himbo. And before you say, Grace, a female himbo is a bimbo. No, they're not the same. Basically, she's
athletic, but she's a bit dumb.
She's athletic, dumb, but kind, which is the criteria for a himbo. So.
In another reality, and if she'd had like more muscles, she could have easily been like a JoJo character. She could have easily been like Tenjojo or something like that. Utena Jo, Tenjo or something like that. Alas, she's not.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Utena has like a very understandable and very plain backstory. You understand it, and you get what makes her tick, and you understand what sort of character you're going to be getting with Utena. And she has very kind of simple ideals, which again are explored in really interesting depth in the second half of the series, and what the implications of that are. But certainly in the first half, it more comes out of a desire to protect Amphi from these kind of horrible males who are trying to possess her. And Utena doesn't want to mistreat Amphi, doesn't want to use her as like an object. Utena sees Amphi for being a person, first and foremost, which then may or may not develop into romantic feelings. See the spoiler section for further discussions of that. So, I mean, it's really easy to like Utena as a character. Like, I'm sure you'd agree.
Oh, absolutely. She's delightful.
Yeah, she's really fun. Yeah.
Yeah, sweet, lovable.
Great voice actor as well. Like, I want to say this now is that like I think the two voice actors, one who does Utena and Amphi, are really good. They are extremely good, especially the woman who does the voice of Amphi. I think she kind of gives a certain cadence to her voice, and like I can't quite describe it, but yeah, she's great. The voice actor of Utena is also equally great. It kind of gives her like this real rambunctious spirit, and you want to see her succeed. You want to see her attain her goal of becoming a prince, which is of course really important for the second half of the series.
Yeah. So I guess that leads into talking about Amphi.
Now, I talk about how plain and simple to understand Utena's backstory is. Amphi is much more of an enigma.
Yeah.
Especially again, since we're kind of not really talking about the second half of the series too much, but you get an idea of who you think Amphi is successfully in the first half of the series.
Yeah.
And that's about as cagey as I'm going to be about it.
Yeah, so I think you start watching this show and Amphi just kind of seems like a complete doormat.
Yeah.
She's nice. She's certainly nice, but she is obedient and very demure, a very kind of turn the other cheek kind of girl, literally, because she gets slapped around a lot.
Yeah, which is hard to watch.
Yeah, it's really hard to talk about her because what you see is not really what you get with Amphi. There is much more to her than you kind of get on the surface, at least for the first half of the show.
Yeah, so like in the first half of the show, she has magic powers, basically.
Yeah.
If anyone's the true magic girl of the show, it's actually not Utena. I would say it's probably Amphi.
I would agree, yeah.
She is the true magic girl of the series, where, like, being the Rose Bride and basically being the betrothed of a Rose Bride, basically lets you pull a sword from her chest. There's this great repeated sequence where, Amphi kind of gets into a bit of a slightly seductive pose, and Utena draws the sword from her breast, kind of thing, and like, give me the power to revolutionize the world is like a repeated thing. And yeah, so it's really hard to get a sense of who she is at first. You think you've got an idea. All the things that Grace has just described there are exactly the same things I thought when watching Amphi. I didn't quite understand Amphi at first. I didn't get why she was continually being slapped around by everyone, or like why she was seemingly okay with it. Why she was so demure. And Nanami, who we'll probably talk about in much greater depth very soon, calls her out for kind of being weird, and you kind of want to go on the defensive a little bit of her, but she kind of is. It's really hard to get handling of who Amphi is, and or even why you should be invested in her as a character, until you get to the second half of the series and you realise that Amphi is probably like the best character in the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, she's so interesting, but you have to stick with it. Like kind of the show itself, you have to stick with it, because Amphi has layers, but layers which are going to have to be reserved for the second half. Yeah.
So I think the next character to bring up would be Toga, actually, who is head of the student council.
The fuck boy.
Yeah, he's kind of just an asshole. And I guess he kind of serves as like the disc 1 villain.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's all I'm going to say about that for now. Yeah, he is kind of a, the redhead pretty boy who...
He's the head of the student council.
Yeah, he is a good manipulator, not only of Utena to begin with, also his younger sister Nanami. He seems very cold, doesn't seem to really care about anybody. And yeah, he is pretty hateable until other people come along who are much worse. So yeah, it kind of puts that in perspective. I would say he does get some positive character development towards the end.
Yeah, I didn't like Toga at first, but by the end of the series, and specifically by the end of the movie, I felt like I understood him a little bit more. And I can't say that I like him, but I could at least see the person as opposed to who I saw before, who was just his role as the fuckboy.
Yeah, the movie actually implies some very dark stuff in his backstory, which we won't talk about here anyway. But yeah. So and then we have some other members of the student council. I want to say there's one called Sanjiro.
No, I think it's called
Saionji.
Who's the green haired one I mentioned earlier. He's kind of like the kendo master, but he's like a more repugnant version of Toga.
Yeah, he's kind of nastier and more violent.
He's much nastier. Yeah. I never really came to a point of liking him.
I would say out of the student council, he is the least developed and interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he basically starts out as like an early rival to Utena. They actually have 2 duels in a row where it's pretty much the exact same setup here. He loses the first duel, challenges Utena again, and then loses again. But he does get, I think, an interesting episode where you think you see you learn a different light to him, I guess, where you kind of find out what he wants to do with the Rose Bride, and it's not what you expect. In that, what he wants to do is basically share a diary back and forth between her.
Yeah.
Which is weird and interesting. But there's also a great episode where, he tries to shack up with Utena's best friend at school, Wakaba, who's also one of the best characters.
Yeah, she's delightful. Really
Wakaba
cute.
is awesome, yeah. I love Wakaba. But yeah, basically, he kind of, after losing the duel, he ends up kind of being cast out from the school, but still hangs around the grounds and stuff. And ends up in secret living with Wakaba for a bit, which is a weird episode. And you think you kind of see something else, like another side of Saionji, but basically, he's a master manipulator. Kind of I said like a much darker side of Toga, I think.
Mm-hmm. Then I guess the next character to talk about, I think, would be Mickey.
Yeah, so I think Mickey and Juri are kind of I think they're kind of good characters to talk about together.
Yeah, actually.
They both have a season-long arc. They both have a season-long story, which is basically told over the course of 3 episodes each. There's about 3 episodes, one in each of the major arcs, where it explores their character in a little bit more depth. The Mickey episode or the Juri episode. So Mickey is like a piano extraordinaire with amazing skill, and he also has a bit of a sister complex that nearly everyone in this show has a sister complex.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you learn a bit more about his kind of piano playing skills and his relationship to his sister, and then that kind of develops over the course of his little mini arc over the course of the season. And then Juri also has a past where she had a very deep friendship / romantic relationship.
I would say canonically
romantic relationship with a female student who was then whisked away by a male suitor, and you learn a bit more about her story. So yeah, the two of them, again, you have your preconceptions about them, but you kind of learn to see them as the people, and I ended up liking them quite a bit. I like Mickey best out of the two. I think he's the most developed, because you see him right after the duel he has with Utena, they kind of just revert to kind of being friends.
Yeah, he's a pretty much a nice guy.
He's okay, Mickey. He's all right.
But I think we kind of joked when we were talking amongst ourselves that he might be the only sympathetic male character in this show.
Oh yeah, 100%, absolutely, yeah.
I mean, maybe aside from the little, I forget his name, but the little boy who hangs around. But yeah. I guess aside very young children, he's probably the only sympathetic male character.
Definitely.
Yeah. I also really like Juri, though. I really like her hidden feelings for this other girl. It really took me by surprise.
Well, that's something that's really interesting, I think, in like shoujo from like this era, where like there is like a surprising amount of queer gay relationships in there. So like in Sailor Moon, for example, where the English dub famously cut out the two gay characters. But I find it interesting that this appears in shoujo from this era. It's a lot more prevalent than you assume it probably would be.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I liked Juri. I think I probably appreciate her character a bit more, maybe like on a rewatch, because I think her character arc is a bit more subtle than Mickey's. I think there's like a little bit more, probably a little bit more to Juri, and I think it's maybe, and that's an important thing as well to talk about this show, is I think it's a show that does demand to be watched twice.
Yeah.
Which I realise is a big investment time considering how long it is and probably how many other shows you do have to watch, but I do think it is a show which would massively benefit a second watch. You know, I'm already calculating in my head how many years we're going to have until we decide to rewatch it, you know.
Yeah. So next, I want to talk about who I think might actually be my personal favourite character in this show. Not necessarily the best, but my favourite, and that's Nanami.
Yeah, I love Nanami.
Yeah.
Again, Nanami is one where she has a brilliant series-long arc.
Yeah.
Like, she goes on such an interesting journey where, again, I learned to consider a bit about, because I noticed it, and I wondered if it was a thing, but like the way that in the No Realities video, she talks about how, because I noticed it straight away as a lifelong anime fan. I noticed things like this, but I noticed that Nanami's eyes weren't coloured in white. Like like most anime character designs will have the white of the eye, and then like the pupil iris section.
Okay, yeah.
And I noticed that Nanami's weren't like painted in white, and I was like, that can't be a mistake. That has got to be a deliberate design choice, basically. And I was right. As it turns out, that was the No Realities video about Nanami, is separate into her kind of hour-long discussion of Utena. She talks about like how Nanami is very reminiscent of the sort of character designs from like classic shoujo from like the 70s.
Oh.
Apparently that was actually quite a common thing to do, to design female characters like that, and not to colour in the whites of their eyes.
Oh, okay.
So Nanami is basically like directly reflecting kind of more like classic shoujo archetypes, and more like classic design, and even her like schemes are so like to show up, because basically she's like arrived. Selk has been like a rival to Utena and Amphi.
Yeah, she's kind of like a bit of a mean girl, but
yeah, she's basically like the main character in so she's like the main character in Mean Girls, basically.
Yeah.
But she's extremely manipulative. She wants to show Utena and Amphi up a couple of weirdos, and she does like classic evil girl things, like, I'm gonna ruin Amphi's dress at the ball, and I'm gonna embarrass them by ruining their cooking and all this sort of stuff.
I'm gonna hide a snail in a pencil case, and it'll look like she keeps snails in her pencil case.
Yeah. It's
plot twist.
Plot twist. Yeah.
Amphi does keep snails in her pencil case.
It's in one of the best scenes of the like one of the best like straight up like comedy scenes of like the entire series. She tries like various schemes to show what a strange person Amphi is, but it just backfires horribly. It just keeps on escalating. Like, the show's got a funny streak.
Yeah.
And Nanami ultimately becomes a showcase for the more surreal elements of Utena and its streak of surrealist comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's, I talked about an episode where she tries to ruin Utena's cooking. She basically sabotages this dish that Utena and Amphi are making as part of, like, I don't know, home ec or whatever it's called, and she basically replaces like a bit of like curry powder to be like this like extremely spicy curry powder or something like that, but she actually accidentally mixes it with like explosives. But she's determined to make this ruse work, so her and a cohort travel to India to source this very specific type of curry powder, and it just goes to such an extreme extra mile to make sure this joke lands. It's so weird.
Yeah.
And then in the absolute highlight of Utena's surrealist comedy streak, she gets like a piece of Dior jewellery in the post, and she wears it around school, not realising that it's actually a cowbell, and she slowly but surely begins to take on the attributes of being a cow before completely transforming into a cow.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, and I love it.
It's bizarre.
It's bizarre, it's so strange.
Yeah.
But Nanami's journey is basically...
Well...
it's interesting, I think.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's partly a journey of, like, respecting... getting over her own internalized misogyny.
Yeah.
Respecting other people. And respecting herself.
Yeah. And she... So we mentioned before, she's actually Toga's younger sister, and she absolutely idolizes him in a way that is almost kind of concerning.
Yeah, because again, at first when I started watching the show, there was lots of what I just call sibling complex issues, which is in anime. It's certainly a trope, and it happens with Mickey, it happens with Nanami, it happens with another character, but we'll talk about that soon. And it's almost like, oh man, this show has a weird fixation on sibling relationships, but then you learn that it's part of a much wider thesis that the show is trying to explore, a much wider theme the show is trying to explore.
Yeah.
Which again doesn't make any sense until we get to the second half. But anyway, you were talking about her fixation with Toga.
Yeah, so obviously we won't talk about yet where that goes, but yeah, she has built her entire identity around being his sister, and it's her journey, I think, is kind of about her growing out of that to some extent anyway. And I know she's just like, she's really funny, and even like she shouldn't be likable, but yeah. She kind of is.
Yeah, she definitely is, especially like when you learn something like really like dark about her past and something that she did in her past to basically keep Toga happy. You're a bit like, this girl is a psychopath.
Yeah, like you should not like her, but there's something about her stupid laugh and her...
She does that like great like evil anime cackle, which I love.
Nanami.
She's also kind of a dumb, naive little girl, and it is like to the point where it's actually weirdly quite endearing.
Yeah, and her journey is kind of going from being a naive little girl into a more aware woman.
Yeah,
or at least a more aware young adult. She sees things which changes her, which again is so hard to talk about without talking spoilers.
Yeah.
But anyway, now that I ended up really liking Nanami by the end of the series, like she's a constant delight, I think. Well, she's not a constant delight, she's a bit of a bitch, to be honest. She's kind of horrible, but
yeah,
I really like her.
But I love her.
Yeah, she's great. Yeah, I really like her, yeah.
Okay, and I guess the last character to bring up would be Anathy's older brother, Akio.
Yes.
Who, he is actually the acting chairman of the academy. That is because he's engaged to I believe he's engaged to the actual chairman's daughter.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah. Again, there's not a lot you can say about him without getting into spoiler territory, but I will say he is very personable and charming.
He's handsome, charming, knows how to talk to the ladies, and imply the guys as well.
Yeah. He seems like a nice, protective older brother.
Yes.
Yeah.
Until you find out he's the absolute worst, but we'll talk about
that
more in the spoiler
later.
section.
So the way we often structure the episodes of this podcast, I think it works for most of the animes we talk about, but I don't think it leaves much room for what I am going to call here. I've got a heading in my notes called the weird stuff.
Ah, yes, the weird stuff.
The weird stuff, and really, I think it is the weird stuff that makes Utena.
Yeah, like talking about all the formal elements of this show makes it sound like, what is the big deal with this show? Like, it sounds pretty standard, but there's a certain degree of presentation to Utena where like it creates this kind of this tone which I can't quite describe outside of kind of being almost like warm yet kind of distant, and you don't really feel like you're ever getting a full grasp of the proceedings.
Yeah.
There's this, and again, we'll talk about this a bit more. Like, I think in the spoiler section. The spoiler section could be huge, by the way. Yeah, like it kind of the show successfully creates this atmosphere where like you feel like really anything could happen.
Yeah,
you don't really know where it's going to go.
It's got someone's like I think dream logic.
Yeah, like a lucid, dreamlike logic to it.
There's lots of weird imagery, just lots of it.
Part of like the repeated animation is of Utena going to the duelist battlefield. Every duelist has to go up like a big winding staircase hidden behind like a big door with water and stuff. She climbs up the spiraling staircase to kind of get to like the arena, and hanging in the sky is like a castle that's upside down and stuff, and that's a really strong. There's also strong visuals to the show, also strong iconography. So the dueling arena, the upside down castle, the kind of background architecture of the school itself, and it all just helps to build up kind of this overall picture of what the place is like. And it's interspersed with in each episode, about halfway through, they basically have an appearance from the Shadow Girls.
Ah, yes, I really, really like the Shadow Girls.
So the Shadow Girls initially start off as almost kind of being like a Greek chorus commenting on what is going on in the episode about halfway through, just to kind of get the audience up to scratch on what's going on, before slowly but surely kind of just veering into just madness. Like, no relation to really anything.
Maybe some relation if you read between the lines, but it's not apparent on the surface.
Yeah. Like, seemingly we're not really talking about anything about what's actually going on in the show.
And by the way, when we say Shadow Girls, it's because they are like shadows that you kind of see projecting on this rose-patterned wall.
Yeah.
Just talking to each other, and there's this odd bit of music that plays as they're speaking, and
you'll also learn what the Japanese for extra is. You know, gogai, gogai, gogai. That'll be seared into your head.
And on the surface, I think these bits are funny comedic breaks from the story, but I don't know if you got this, but I always felt there was something just a little bit unsettling about them.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah.
And it's really hard to put my finger on why.
I think I could point to a few of these. I think going into the music. The music that's played in the background is unlike anything else. And we will talk about the music of Utena.
Oh, yeah.
We will talk about the music of Utena in depth. But I think it's partly like the music. I think it's the fact they only appear at like sunset. Like it's kind of like the twilight era point. And again, there's something about the school where almost like spirits and ghostly apparitions could like haunt the hallways, and that's something again we'll talk about a bit more in a bit. And yeah, it's very kind of talk in riddles, and they seem to be omniscient and distant. I
wonder. Do you know what I wonder?
Yeah. So no, there is a creepy quality to them in their intangibility.
Yeah, and you never see their faces, of course. Like there's even an episode where they do show up in the story proper, and they do talk to Utena, but you still don't see their faces the way that they're like angled, so that's kind of a bit unsettling too.
Yeah, so that's another element to the show which again kind of gives it its structure, but it gets weirder and weirder and weirder with it. I mean, whatever weird stuff is there.
Well, there is the music. We can start.
Well, yeah, the music. Yeah, okay. So obviously, normally in these sorts of things, we would rank the openings, but there's only one opening for the 39 episodes of Utena, which is an upbeat little pop song called Rinbu Revolution, which translates as Round Dance Revolution, which, you know, again, huge part of Utena is revolutions and cyclical things and all that sort of stuff, so it's very appropriate. Song's great, love it, it's iconic, opening's brilliant, it just perfectly sums up the show. And then you got the ending as well, which is Making Kiss and Fall in Love, which I don't know what the song is called, but it's really good. And you got to hear some of my singing as well there, which doesn't come on too often.
Count yourself lucky.
Count yourself lucky. So I just call it the Kiss and Fall in Love song. I don't know what it's called.
Isn't that the or in High School Host Club song? Something like that.
Kiss, fall in love. Yeah, that's the one, yeah. But there is a more iconic piece of music used whenever Utena goes up to go fight the duels. It's called Zetai Ume Moku Shiroku And honestly, it will be stuck in your head forever.
Forever.
Like, I will just walk around our flat, even now, like, after finishing watching the show about a week ago, like, just still singing, like, Watashi no tanjo, zettai tanjo, mokoshi, roku, dun, dun, dun. And you get, like, different variations of it as well. Like, it's awesome. My favourite one, incidentally, is the second variation used in the Black Rose arc, because it has some awesome like drums to go with the crazy bit at the end. It goes like Mokoshi, da, 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 and you get like the awesome drum bits. Like it just elevates that sequence that you keep on seeing constantly, and the lyrics are bizarre.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, it's actually the title translates to Absolute Destiny Apocalypse, which. If that doesn't sound cool, I don't know what does. Yeah, and like at the end of every single episode for the next time teaser for the next episode, it always ends with Amphi saying, "Zeta ume mokushi roku," like just a great sounding piece of dialogue. But this is accompanied even further by equally bizarre songs which are used over the duels, which are like a similar type of music. It's kind of like weird, like. Orchestral choir Japanese metal prog. I can't quite describe it, but there's these bizarre songs which also play over the duels, which talk about like not like like grand things which you don't expect from a shoujo, like time and dinosaurs and medieval history and sometimes embryos
and science and biblical references and
hermaphroditism in like literally that was the lyric or what it translated to anyway.
And certainly because we watched this show on Funimation, the translators at Funimation knew how important understanding or at least understanding what the lyrics were saying, where we often don't go the extra mile a lot of translations, but we made sure to have like two sets of dialogue where you can follow the fights and the duels, but also see what the song is singing about, because it's utter jumbled garbage, but it's kind of brilliant at the same time, because it gives the duels these kind of like huge, destiny-defining moments, and it's just it's just great. So Zeta Ume Mokushi Roku is just like, and I want that on a t-shirt, and I want to see how many people can get the reference.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm guessing like 5 people, but like, whatever. Great stuff, just brilliant.
And I mean, so it is stuff like that makes Utena, and you could go further talking about all this. Like, we could talk about some of the weird stuff that happens in the Black Rose arc, and the imagery with the lift that goes down while people get interviewed while in a lift, and they kind of get forced to.
It's almost like a Catholic confessional box.
Yeah, they kind of they start like talking about their fears and desires, and a voice will tell them to go deeper as the lift continues to descend, and they literally start to go deeper, talking about more and more personal stuff.
Because like I don't think this is necessarily like spoilers, but like you get to the end of the first arc, which is known as the school council arc or school council saga, whatever you want to call it, and you get to the Black Rose saga, which is the second major one. The Black Rose saga is one which I had like a little bit of trouble with, because I thought it got like a little bit too repetitive. Coming off of watching 12 episodes of like setup of I Understand the World, the Black Rose arc basically does things that are slightly different, but still ultimately too similar to the first arc. I think that's the problem. Even though I think it's arguably the most crucial arc of the show, because it does mark a key change in the tonal shift. You're kind of moving away from slightly more like high school antics of the first 12 episodes, like, Utena's living with this weird, strange girl, and she's a bit quirky and a bit strange, and you get into a slightly more weirder territory with the Black Rose arc, and it's got a neat little overarching story which links into the main wider lore of the world, which is kind of cool. But yeah, ultimately I think goes on a little bit too long. But that's my only criticism, really. Other than that, the Black Rose arc I think is pretty good. It's got some really good stuff in it, I think. But for me, the next arc and the final arc, was 4 in total, but for me, the next arc for me was my absolute favourite, which was the Akio Otori saga, which I think is brilliant, but we cannot absolutely talk about it without getting into spoilers.
Yeah.
We absolutely have to now flag up the warning. At 53 minutes in, this is where the real conversation about Utena is going to begin.
Yeah.
So, if you want our quick recommendations, and you don't want to be spoiled by anything, Revolutionary Girl Utena, you've got to get into the pace of it. It took me a little bit to kind of get into it slow. Coming off of more modern shows like Demon Slayer and My Hero Academia, it was a little bit tricky for me at first to kind of get back into the slower beat of like 90s anime. It took me a little bit, but when I kind of got used to it, I got into the beat of the show, especially when you get into that second half and you get to the movie, it is 100% worth it. As I said, I would argue it's like the best show that we've seen so far. Technically, the best show we've seen so far. Even though it's not like a personal favourite of mine, I can a purveyor of fine art and a master of finding it in trash. I would put Utena up as like the best show we've seen so far.
Yeah, it is so interesting.
It's interesting, consistently interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have to get into spoilers now. Would any quick thoughts for our viewers listeners who are going to tune out here?
None except, I really recommend you watch it. I think it's great. You'll maybe see, if you do stick around to listen to the spoiler section, you may get a clearer understanding of why.
Yeah,
I think
I think it's the cagiest we've ever been in a discussion of the show, because it is so hard to talk about it. Like a Demon Slayer, what's the spoiler? They fight some more demons.
Yeah.
It's pretty standard fare, but this, it takes such an interesting turn, a revolution, if you will, that, we have to talk about spoilers now.
Yeah.
So, that's it, that's your warning. So, the Akio Otori arc kind of marks, the third season of the show, I guess, if you look at it in a more traditional sense. Utena and Amphi have decided to, Amphi's moved back in with her brother, and to kind of help her out, Akio thinks it's a great idea that Utena should live with Amphi, which is a bit like, okay, he's Amphi's older brother. Okay, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? He seems okay, this Akio guy. He's a fiance, he seems okay. But pretty quickly something is up. Toga goes out on strange night rides with Akio, in which the most glorious thing happens. Real quick, the duelists in the school council arc are basically inspired to fight Utena to try and get the Rose Bride. The duelists in the Black Rose arc are basically kind of being manipulated by an implied ghost to basically fight Utena by drawing out deep-set emotions that they have, to basically pit her against Utena and think getting a Rose Bride will fix their kind of problems. Now, in this arc, it's a little bit different. It's, you basically learn a bit about Akio and his manipulative powers and how he's manipulating a lot of
everyone.
Everyone, basically.
Everyone. All the people in the Black Rose arc, all the ghosts, all the student council members.
Everyone.
Everybody.
And this is where the horny levels of the show also just explode. It's definitely a lot more sexual and not in like a kind of, you go, Utena and Amphi. It's creepy. Yeah. Because the implication, certainly to me, is that Akio, because they go on like night rides together, and the revving of the engines and stuff, and the way they position themselves in the car, it's almost orgasmic.
Yeah.
I think the implication is meant to be that he is giving them sort of like sexual favours, and he's grooming these school children.
Yeah.
And it becomes apparent very quickly that he is grooming Utena.
Yeah.
They start a sexual relationship in this arc.
Yeah.
And you just you're watching it and you're like,
oh no.
Oh
no, honey. Utena is 14, by the way.
Yeah. And there's a great bit of visual filmmaking as well, where she's about to lose her virginity to Akio, but the stop signs on the ground on the tarmac as the car's driving and stuff, and it's a great visual storytelling. But then the icing on the icing on the cake is the reveal that Akio is sleeping with his sister Amphi.
And it probably has been going on for quite a while.
And you're a bit like, oh my god. And the one who kind of you as the viewer learn about it sooner than the characters do, but the one who learns about it in universe is actually Nanami, who of course has her kind of strange relationship with her brother, which quickly puts things into perspective for her and realises I don't want that.
Because she is disgusted, as rightly.
Yeah, rightly disgusted by it when she sees incest. Like actual incest, and it's disturbing, and you realise that Akio is horrible, and he's been manipulating every single child, because they are children basically in the school, including the males as well. Toga, I think there's lots of Toga's like 17, I think. There's lots of implied, like again the positioning and the body language and the way the animation's done. There's lots of implied, like I think sexuality to their the way they talk and the way they interact with each other. It's they have the shirts unbuttoned.
Yeah, I think that there's a bit where Akio is like taking photographs of Toga lying shirtless across the car.
Yeah.
He is just. He is the worst.
He's horrible.
He's the worst.
He's the absolute worst, yeah.
And I think the way he grooms Utena it feels so like what real predators do.
Yeah, definitely.
He kind of makes her feel like special, and they have like, oh, this is a secret between you and me. You're my special friend.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think makes her feel grown up in a way that obviously she's not. She's a child, and
exactly, yeah. And the scary thing about Akio is that unlike a lot of the villains we've talked about so far in the course of this series, like your All for Ones, or you like your. I don't know, you silly. I don't know why. I was thinking of. I'm reading the slightly controversial Thriller arc in One Piece, which has what the series regards as being like the worst villain of the series. He's like a silly vampire or something. And I was reading that whilst watching Akio, and it just made me chuckle for some reason, because it's so worlds apart. Where I think the problem with a lot of shonen villainy is that they can only exist in the realm of shonen, like the guy, like the guy with the hands on his face, like in My Hero Academia. A great villain with really interesting motives, but he can only really exist in the world of My Hero Academia. Akio exists in this world. There are people like this in this world, and probably too many people like this in this world who use their privilege and their authority over vulnerable people and young women specifically to get whatever messed up shit that they want to get out of pursuing these sorts of relationships. And from an outside perspective, Akio on the surface level, he's handsome, he's got a great job, he's got a fiance, he's got a great car, he lives in an observatory, he seems to be a bit educated, but he grooms young girls and young boys as well. I would make the argument of
he has been sexually abusing his own sister for God knows how long.
Yeah. So when I say the Black Rose arc is flawed, but also the most critical arc of Utena, you can't go from the school council arc to this arc straight away.
No.
You need something in between, and I think the Black Rose arc works a bit more in retrospect now, because it's priming you for the darker side of this show, where the Black Rose arc kind of, the villain's motives are a bit stranger, and there's talk about death a lot more, and you're getting into the neuroses of the characters a lot more, which is what I really like in the Black Rose arc. I like how the main villain, who's implied to be a ghost, we'll talk about that in a bit, how he's drawing out these emotions out of the school children to pit them against Utena, and that's priming you to thinking about the plight of being a teenager in a world controlled by a patriarchy, controlled by these rules and confined by these rules. And then at the top you have Akio, who literally controls the rules of the school and sits atop of the school patriarchy, using his power to manipulate vulnerable people. And it is, if you've got a volition towards that sort of thing, I could understand how it could be a difficult show.
Definitely
to watch.
Definitely, for some people, it's going to be triggering, and that's that. So in a way, you maybe do want to know at least a little of what goes on in the show going in.
Yeah, I think you need to know a little bit, especially if you've gone through this sort of experience, because it is very close to the knuckle.
Yeah.
And I was honestly surprised at how it went there. There's quote unquote mature HBO dramas, which honestly I do not think go to the levels that the show goes to. But better yet, it does it through the visual medium. It does it through symbolism, implication, and it's a thing where I talk about where a show like Utena could only exist as animation, because honestly I think if it was in live action it'd be a bit too much. I know there's a stage musical of Utena coming out, and I don't know if there's a big song number about this.
Oh god,
I try to make it light of this, because it is obviously very serious stuff. And the show doesn't shy away from the implications of it, and basically how it because you built over the course of the 2 arcs through everything. Utena and Amphi are a rock solid foundation, but Akio, through his manipulation of both of them, threatens to destroy the beautiful friendship that they've created, and obviously the burgeoning romance between the two of them. Akio's intention is basically, presumably to try and stop Utena from, revolutionising the world. He basically ultimately just wants the Rose Bride for himself, so he can attain. We not really talked about the grander narrative of the show so far, but basically the idea is that, again, this is Norality's interpretation, but they constantly get letters from their characters end of the world, and through doing the duels, winning the Rose Bride, doing various things, you're able to unlock the door to kind of almost like this world's version of God, and achieve a great power. The power to revolutionise the world. And we talk about revolutions. Again, this is from kind of a thing that's brought about in the Norality's video, where we talk about revolutions, we think of kind of France, the French Revolution,
uprisings,
that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But more in the case of Utena, it's about turning the world around, having the power to literally revolve the world. That's what they are fighting for, is for a form of godhood. Basically, it's very esoteric. It doesn't really come about until the final few episodes, but I would make the point that's kind of what we're ultimately fighting for. So yeah, Akio and his grand manipulation of all of his people is to achieve the ultimate power and become the ultimate staple of the patriarchy and be at the top. And yeah, so as this third arc is the one where it really started making it for me. Yeah. Leading into then directly into the final arc, the fourth, which is a bit shorter, but it's kind of the apocalypse arc where everything falls apart, and it's beautiful, but bittersweet and sad in a way where, in the end, Utena comes to the conclusion that she couldn't be a prince for Amphi.
Yeah.
And
I guess we should talk about Amphi a little bit more.
Yeah, we should talk about Amphi a bit more, because she's critical to do this. So do you want to take it away?
Well, we get a bit more almost like lore, I guess, of Amphi and Akio, and obviously this show is very obtuse, but I get the impression that they're actually hundreds, if not thousands, of years old. Yeah. And, I think Akio at one point was a prince. Yeah. And he nearly died trying to maybe save somebody. And Amphi tried to protect him from an angry mob, and she got stabbed by a million swords by this angry mob. So she is still alive, but it's like she's in like constant pain.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of like her fate, to be impaled by all these swords all the time. That's the fate of the Rose Bride.
So part of like one of the big theories of the show is that the school is basically stuck in like a time loop.
Yeah.
Where the revolution, the bad form of revolution, is that Akio is basically every single time he's looking to attain godhood, but continues to fail. So he soft resets the school, basically. So every single time he fails, he soft resets the school and tries again, setting up the duels, setting up the Rose Bride thing, and all that sort of stuff in an attempt to go through the door to attain this form of godhood. We know that this sort of thing can happen in the context of the show because the Black Rose arc ends with the implication that the main villain of that arc is actually a ghost. And there was a part of the school where hundreds of people died and part of the school burned down, but no one can remember it. You know, like things have just kind of continued as normal. And then at the ending of the show, we're in spoilers now, so whatever, Utena is not at the school anymore, and Akio says people are forgetting Utena already. Mm. So the implication is that Akio has like grand control over the school and all that sort of stuff. So he's able to kind of soft reset the world, basically. Which is interesting, which again helps to explain the movie, which we'll get onto in a little bit. But yeah, so at the centre of this is Amphi, where like every single time Akio resets the world, it's yet more pain she has to go through, more drama that she has to go through, and she ends up becoming cold and distant. She actually tries to commit suicide at one point.
Yeah.
Towards the end of the series, presumably in an attempt to kill herself to stop her from having to go through the emotional turmoil of having the world be reset constantly and going through the same pain every single time. And into her life comes Utena just crashing into it as pure chaos. You know, Utena and Amphi's relationship is interesting because, like, you know, you think you understand it at first. You know, Utena is there to protect Amphi, and Amphi is happy to be protected by Utena, but as it turns out, it was all play. Kind of like the prince and the princess in a fairy tale, you know. A lot of it is pantomime, it's pure play.
Amphi is kind of playing a role for Utena, and at the same time, Utena's kind of playing a role too, because it's kind of pointed out towards the end, she didn't really make a real effort to understand Amphi, or, you know, what, or kind of get a grasp on the sort of things she might be going through.
Yeah.
So, you know,
she basically realises too late, and that's pretty much towards the end of the show, as everything is literally collapsing in around them, that what they need to do is not see each other in such gendered roles, but to see each other as people.
Yeah.
You know, again, which is why the symbolism, I think, right at the end of the film is really important. Where, like, you know, we'll talk about the film in a bit, because the film has a lot to talk about with the film. But yeah, so the ending of the series is like this incredibly bittersweet thing of, you know, Utena ultimately does break through the door and finds the real Amphi at the end of all this, and basically helps to stop Akio from going through the door himself. He fails once again. And the soft reset of the world begins to happen as Utena disappears into a black void, basically, as the arena, the symbols of this the patriarchy of this world kind of literally crumble around her while she bemoans, "I couldn't be your prince." You know, the audience expectation is that, you know, Utena is going to rise up to become the prince, and you want to see that happen, but it can't happen because the show is questioning, why do we have these gendered roles?
Yeah.
Why is this patriarchy in place in the first time? And at the end, the school is soft reset.
Yeah.
And, you know, people are forgetting Utena, except for Amphi, who takes it upon herself to take some agency and seek out Utena again. So there's a real bittersweet ending to the show. And
I think there's a theme here that you can't, as much as you might want to, you can't save somebody from a toxic or abusive relationship.
Yeah.
They kind of have to do it. You can be there for them, but they kind of have to do it themselves.
And that is definitely one of the best things, is that, like, the show ultimately cleverly changes the agency of the characters around. And I think it primes you for that. Because obviously, I talked about how to fight the duels, Utena has to draw a sword from Amphi's chest. In the second half of the series, it's actually the opposite way around. Amphi pulls a sword from Utena's chest for her to fight in. So the agency of the scene has kind of changed, like quite cleverly. So then that primes you then for, Amphi having to make the choice for herself. Ultimately, Utena does not achieve godhood or whatever revolutionise the world means, but she did change Amphi, and Amphi's choice to leave Akio, leave a toxic relationship behind, to become her own person. And to try and find Utena, but on a thematic character level of trying to become her own person and get out of this toxic relationship, which is interesting.
Yeah. So, is this a good point to talk about the movie?
I mean, if you want, I don't know how much of the ending you want to kind of get into, but of the TV show. But I think I've kind of summarised good parts of it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, no worries. We might as well talk about the movie, because the movie is fascinating. And Utena, or the movie, the 1999 film, The Adolescence of Utena, is basically the piece of Utena media that solidified it to me that Utena is absolute genius, and it is the best thing we've watched so far. So, yeah, the 1999 film is often billed as being a alternative reality retelling of the show, but I think that significantly undersells it, especially if you buy into the time loop theory, which I certainly do. I think that's the theory that makes the most sense. So, The Adolescence of Utena, it opens with Utena now short hair. We're back in the school again, but the school looks different this time. The school is falling apart. It almost looks like it's different from the soft, lovely palette and the Venetian landscape, Venetian architecture. It now looks like an Escher painting of like staircase and literally falling apart. Like it's visually stunning. As Utena has her first day at Authority Academy, and you can see how the technology of the school's advanced as well. We don't write on chalkboards anymore. We now have like computer screens and stuff. So time has clearly passed on, but also time hasn't passed on. Again, buying into this kind of time loop theory. We see Wakaba, who's Utena's friend again, introduces her to the school, and events begin to play out in a familiar but ever so slightly off fashion. Utena has her first duel, you have her fight Saionji, you see Toga again, and Amphi is introduced as well, and obviously the implication is that this is the Amphi from the TV show.
Yeah, because Amphi behaves differently this time around.
Yeah.
Yeah, she seems a lot more active and kind of a lot more forward with Utena.
Well, yeah, but the first thing she does is when she sees Utena again is kiss her.
Yeah.
Now, I have a theory. I have a theory about this. This is my own theory.
Oh, okay.
So Amphi's different in the film, but an important character is missing. Nanami. Mm-hmm. Okay, so at the end of the series, everyone seems to be forgetting about Utena except for Amphi. Utena left such an impact on Amphi that she couldn't forget Utena. I want to make the argument that Nanami also couldn't forget Utena. Now, Amphi is kind of a master of pretending to be something that she's not. She could pretend that she doesn't remember Utena, you know what I mean? Like,
okay.
She could be a bit more demure about it, you know. She can kind of, but Nanami can't. She's, you know, if Amphi's ice, then Nanami's fire, and she can't forget Utena, and she can't forgive Akio for what he's done, and how he's cast Utena out, and what this all means for the world, and the implication that these students have been stuck in this time loop for hundreds, if not maybe thousands of years. So Akio silenced Nanami. Not through death, because as we learned in the world of Utena, death is not the inconvenience that it used to be. Ghosts can walk around and have a physical presence. Instead, he did some sort of like weird magic and banished her. she gets turned into a cow.
Okay.
Which is what we see in the film.
Yeah, that is. I thought you were going to go slightly differently with that. I thought you were going to say that Anthe, who does seem to have magic powers, turned her into a cow because she didn't want Nanami to blow her cover.
Oh, possibly, yeah.
I think either theory actually holds up.
And I also think the reason for... Because I think Utena is also the same Utena from the TV show. I think Utena's plan was basically to return to the school, knowing that she'd probably lose her memories by going back, by being stuck in this time loop again, but knowing, again, pre-entering the school, knowing that re-entering the school and losing her memories, but her love for Anthe would override it, and they would find each other again. And I think Anthe has the same theory. She returns to the school knowing that Utena is going to return one day. Thus, the grand reunion of the two, the kiss. It's an overwhelming sense of emotion, basically.
Yeah, and it is. I think, people who think it is like a separate canon, I don't think it works if it is. Personally,
I don't think it works as a separate canon. No.
Like that kiss feels like it's been built up.
Yeah, because they actually don't kiss in the TV show.
No.
The movie definitely has more kissing of Utena and Anthe, which is obviously great because it's an absolute unambiguous confirmation of the status of their relationship and how they feel about each other. And yeah, so I that's my theory about how they end up where they are. Because Utena seems more worldly. I think the fact that having shorter hair as well is normally like a good indicator of like a character growth. I know it's some impression that her hair's like braided or something like that, but visually she looks older. Which my argument is that she returned to the school. She knows that she'd lose her memories, but she knows that because of her love for Anthe and vice versa, they would find each other again and find a way to escape. So then that's what happens. Like they plot their escape from this world, and some things, there's some contradictions thrown in. Obviously now it seems that Utena had a romantic relationship with Toga. It's talked about in a bit of depth, but again, this is just maybe other ways that the manipulation of Akio could be working.
Yeah,
he could have programmed in, I don't know. Yeah,
like it is a time loop, so maybe in this version of events they kind of did.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other weird thing is that Toga's like dead now.
Yeah. So again, we were talking about like how death isn't the inconvenience that it used to be, which is a Red Dwarf quote, by the way.
Yeah.
And yeah, so like the implication is again, that the Toga's dead as well and has been dead this whole time because again, physical spirits can walk around and interact and. Because this time loop's been going on for so long. This is another important thing as well. It's a really important thing I think with this show is that I don't think the technicalities of how all this works matter one bit.
No, I agree.
These are kind of just fun theories because the show and the film leaves it open to you. I love that this media franchise, whatever you want to call it, doesn't hold your hand. It is up to you to interpret events how you want it. Which I think is the best element of Utena. I think absolutely. And
we're not here to be cinema sins like,
Bing!
Finding plot holes in.
All of a sudden, Utena has a relationship with Toga. This was not the original series.
Yeah.
Bing! Drowning. Bing!
It's I think it works for me certainly on an emotional level.
Yes. What I always say about anything is that the logic of what's going on doesn't need to make sense as long as you understand the emotions of the characters. Great example, Eraserhead. Mm-hmm. David Lynch, one of the best films of the 70s, and I'd argue one of the best films of all time. The logic of how that world works and how he's able to go into a radiator and who the radiator girl is and what the nature of his world is, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter one iota because the story is about my interpretation is about new fatherhood and the fears and anxieties of becoming a new father and a sudden new father. So the logic of how the world works doesn't really matter. as long as you understand the emotions of the characters, which I think people kind of don't come flavour to. Again, I can almost imagine this coming out, like if Utena came out now, for example, I think people would pick plot holes in it a lot more. Because there are, like, it's not perfect. The Adolescence of Utena, I can understand why people do think of it as kind of been separate to the series, because it doesn't marry up perfectly. But I think that could easily be explained. If you want a logic explanation, I think that could be explained by a time loop theory and Akio resetting things in ways to throw people off, basically, He thinks the duelists are going to throw off Utena by defeating her. He thinks by initiating a romantic relationship with Utena that's going to stop her as well, but she doesn't. She continually stands up against these obstacles, so it's maybe no surprise that part of this soft reboot is quote-unquote programming in a past relationship with Toga, again, to try and stop her from emotionally manipulating her.
Yeah.
So the movie's brilliant. It's so visually ravishing. The animation is gorgeous, and there's nothing as well that Norales points out as well. All the characters' hair's longer as well, which is except for Utena's. But again, that's another implication that time has moved on in this world, even though it's still stood still. I think that also really works as well towards that theory. But yeah, it's billed as being a retelling of the anime, but it really isn't, in my opinion. Like, it really, really is a sequel. Because I was at first a bit like, okay, this is kind of weird and interesting, but then it kind of started clicking with me a bit more. And we build towards one of the strangest third acts in anything I've ever seen. I would say this is the strangest anime film I've seen since the end of Evangelion. If Revolutionary Girl Utena did to the magic girl genre to what Evangelion did to the mecha genre, then the Adolescence of Utena is truly its end of Evangelion. It's weird, it's esoteric, it's visually ravishing, it's gorgeous to look at, and it's completely impenetrable to newcomers.
Yeah.
So no, I really love the Adolescence of Utena. It might even be one of my favourite sections of the Utena experience. I mean, that and the Akio arc.
Yeah.
What did you think of it?
I loved it too. I really, really did love this whole show.
Yeah, but the whole thing was great. But go back to this strange third act as well. The way that they escape the dream world is also awesome as well. Utena in her final transformation turns into a car. Yeah, like, it's so weird.
Which Anthe drives away.
And then Mickey and Juri and Saionji turn up in a tow truck, which is also Wakaba. Did you notice that?
Oh no!
Yeah, the license plate said Wakaba. So Wakaba's been turned into a car as well.
Why not?
But yeah, as they race towards escaping this world, and to face whatever reality is that they're in, and Akio catches up with them, the prince catches up. We don't really talk about the Dios or anything like that too much, but I don't think it really matters too much, because it's all part of the wider lore of the series. The castle chases after them, which is now on wheels, which is a little bit like Mortal Engines.
Yeah.
That was awesome. And then, right at the end, they break through into the new world, and, there's so much visual layering in this film, Utena wears her hair up, a bit like Anthe did at the start of the series, and now the opposite is true of Anthe. Now she wears her hair down, while at the start of the series she wore her hair up. They've learned something from each other, and they break into the new world naked as the day they were born. I'd argue it's not done for titillation. I think it is done for a thematic purpose of they are seeing themselves really for the first time. They're seeing each other for the first time.
Yeah, the real them.
The real them. They're seeing each other for the first time. Bare naked as the day they were born. I love how the world they collapse into is like a destroyed wasteland, and it's like, fuck this. Maybe the world they've come into is, not good. But and what's happened? Like, why is the world like that? Again, all that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter one iota, because
they have each other.
They have each other, and it's the emotional core.
Yeah.
Sorry, I feel like I completely took over that conversation of the movie, but I had a lot to say.
I don't feel like I have much to add, except yes, and yes.
Yeah.
It is like you describe.
Yeah. It's almost like my degree was in film. But no, so like, the Adolescence of Utena is a brilliant cap-off to the series. Extremely satisfying, in the same way that End of Evangelion is a similar satisfying conclusion to the series, even if it goes off a complete deep end in slightly different ways.
I mean, I would say I do not think this film would stand on its own at all.
God, no.
Which I think is fine, by the way. But I was kind of amused when we watched it, and I was just trying to imagine what it would be like if I hadn't seen the TV show.
Yeah, you would be like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Like, what? That's it, really. This might be the longest one we've done. It might even be the longest episode we ever do. I don't know. But I think we've covered our bases, or at least in the most messiest way possible, talked about the show and what we think it's all about.
Yeah.
And hopefully got an idea of why you should watch it. Because it is quite brilliant, and it's only dawned upon me in the final few episodes and with the movie quite how brilliant it is. It's so dense, it's so layered, and we don't even scratch the surface of the show. It's 39 episodes in a movie, it's a lot to talk about. We've just given like a hint, an idea of what this journey's like.
Yeah, it is. I think you do have to. You just have to be there, man. You have to see it for yourself. You
just have to go in head first and just go along for the ride. It's a great ride.
Yeah.
It's I ended up really loving the show. It's funny, when I first started watching it, I said okay, I like it, but I don't love it. Now I'm kind of veering towards kind of loving it. And I think if we were to rewatch it in a few years' time, I think that I'd probably just confirm it.
Yeah.
It's a great show. It's well worth watching. In the UK, you can watch it on Funimation. It's also available on the gorgeous All the Anime box sets as well, which, until we found out it was on Funimation, we were considering investing in, but each one's there's 3 box sets, each one's 40 quid each or something, so it's a heavy investment, but probably well worth it, to be honest. Yeah, so it's the point of a show where we normally talk about ranking openings, but there's only one.
There's only one, it's great.
It's honestly brilliant. I love the opening of the show. Again, it might be one of the all-time best anime openings.
Yeah.
So the song's great, the animation's good.
I mean, we've talked so much about visual symbolism, and obviously we talked about revolutions, and there's so much of things turning in this opening.
Yeah.
I also love the bit that has Utena and Anthe as knights on horseback.
Oh, I love that bit. Yeah. I was wondering, when's that scene gonna happen? But it never did.
It didn't, except in a metaphorical sense, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So it's certainly an experience, and in my opinion, well worth watching. Even with about a million other modern anime classics to watch, you could be watching, I don't know, any of the critically acclaimed animes coming out of 2021. You could be watching Odd Taxi. I don't know, but no, going back to a show like this, I think is well worth your time. And again, the anime is capable of so much. Yeah, part of me is kind of sad that they don't make shows like this anymore, to be honest. It's a unique beast. Absolutely unique beast.
It is indeed.
But anyway, now we probably need to rank where we put these.
Oh
where we put these shows. It's very difficult.
This is hard.
I kind of taught myself into ranking the show quite high, to be honest.
I think my question, I think the thing I'm having difficulty with is I don't think this show is as watchable as some of my very highly ranked shows.
Yeah, so I think probably to say for us as well, I think probably favourite as well kind of goes hand in hand with watchability. I don't think necessarily my favourite things are also like necessarily the best things.
Oh, same.
So sometimes it marries up. You know,
Yeah.
The Godfather Part 1 is one of my all-time favourite films, and I would also argue it's also one of the best films of all time. Or, you know, like one of my all-time favourite films is Pink Flamingos, but I think I'd struggle to make an argument that it's the best film of all time, even though I would have a go.
Yeah.
At arguing that Pink Flamingos is one of the best films of all time, but it's probably not. But it's certainly a favourite. Or Rocky Horror Picture Show, for example. That's a great example, actually. I love Rocky Horror Picture Show to death, but like I admit that it's flawed. Parts of it really don't work. It lumbers on a little bit, but I love it.
Yeah.
It's one of my favourites, like one of my all-time favourite films. So while I think Utena is like probably the best show we've watched so far, it's not as watchable as some of my all-time favourites. You know, My Hero Academia is trash by comparison, but
Yeah.
like, you know, it's great trash. You know,
Yeah.
it's well-made trash. You know, obviously I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, we love it.
I'm not hating on
Yeah,
My Hero.
we
'Cause
love
I
My Hero.
love it.
Yeah.
But Utena is, I would argue, a lot richer and more dense than a lot of the other shows we watched so far. Which again doesn't necessarily mean it's necessarily better, but I would argue from like an aesthetic, technical storytelling point of view, it is probably the best show we watched so far. But
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you do the awkward task first. So how are you gonna rank it?
I still don't know, and I will say this is liable to change because I might think about it a week later and rank Utena like even higher. But okay, for now it's my rankings. At the bottom, Death Note, Demon Slayer, The Promised Neverland, Gurren Lagann, and I think I'm gonna put Utena next.
Okay, yeah.
My Hero, Snafu, Full Metal Alchemist 3, Brotherhood.
Okay, and then for my list, I would still put Death Note at the bottom. I don't think Death Note will ever shift from being at the bottom. Then Demon Slayer, followed by The Promised Neverland, Full Metal Alchemist 3, Gurren Lagann, My Hero Academia,
Oh.
Revolutionary Girl Utena, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, Snafu. So yeah, I probably rank it probably a bit ahead of My Hero Academia.
Oh wow! I mean, I that was the one I was really struggling on.
That was a hard choice. I
Yeah.
had to go a little bit back and forth upon it, but Utena has the advantage of being complete,
Yeah.
and you can see where it's all going to go. Okay, there are a lot. I realize I don't like with My Hero Hate, but I actually don't. I adore that show.
Oh yeah, same. And to be honest, if we come back in a week, I might have changed my mind. I might have switched those two around.
Yeah, the more that I've thought about it, the more that I've kind of looked back at it, and the movie especially, like, it just put a lot of things into perspective about Utena, and everything kind of makes a lot more sense now. And I can see the kind of the genius behind it. So yeah, no, it's I might have to show to my best surprise. I loved it. It's really great.
Hard agree. It's fantastic.
We've stalled long enough now. End of the show. What are we going to do next time?
It's a good question. What are we going to do next time, Chris?
Well, I mean, we'll probably do like a bonus episode because we're currently watching My Teen Romantic Comedy Season 3, also known as My Teen Romantic Comedy Climax, the final season, or presumed final season of this show. I can't wait to find out which girl he gets together with, and I can't wait to find out what drama is on the internet, because their ship didn't happen. Because as we all know, the internet can have civilized conversations about ships.
Oh yeah.
And then after that, I don't know. I'm torn. I want to see either Neon Genesis Evangelion, or I think we need a complete Shonen palette cleanser to kind of, get something new. I'm pretty eager to watch Jujutsu Kaisen. I've heard really great things about that show, but I'm also eager to get Grace onto JoJo's Bizarre Adventure as soon as possible. So I don't know. Hopefully I'll have come to a choice when we record our bonus episode about My Teen Romantic Comedy.
Yeah. Until then, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Give me the power to revolutionise the world.
Akio is the worst though.